This video is to demonstrate the effect of blade height or projection on material feeding and the potential for kickback on the saw stop table saw. OSHA requirements are that when you feed the wood in, 1/4 of an inch of the blade should be sticking out above the board. This is to limit the amount of physical damage that can occur if you somehow manage to get your fingers or hands or articles of clothing caught in the blade. If it's only 1/4 of an inch, it'll be very minimal damage to your body. The problem with 1/4 of an inch of projection is if when you feed the board in at a 1/4 inch projection following the black lines, you can see that the tooth of the blade is actually hitting very hard against the direction that you're pushing the board. So that blade is trying to push that board back away from the saw. So to limit that effect and control it, the manufacturer of this saw has put anti-kickback fingers on the saw. So once you have pushed the board through the saw blade in this direction, as the board goes through, it will contact the anti-kickback fingers. As it keeps pushing, even if you let loose of the board, it's going to try and stop that as best as possible with the teeth on the anti-kickback fingers. So that does work. The issue is then when you start feeding the board, you have to go almost 12 inches from the beginning of the cut before you hit the anti-kickback fingers. So a better method, if possible to use, is to raise the saw blade a little bit higher. I'll demonstrate on this drawing again. The red line shows the board height and board pass height if we raise the blade so that 1 inch of the blade is above the top of the board. This way, as you push the board in, you can see that the initial teeth are cutting downward rather than against the flow. That's actually going to try and hold the board down to the table better. The further you get in, the more the teeth are cutting straight down into the board. It holds the board to the table, and it has less of a tendency to push the board back in a kickback. If you are going to use this method of a high blade setting, you must have the guard installed correctly on the table saw. You cannot have a high pass height on the saw or a high projection on the saw if you're not using a guard. Now the policy is at A&J that we will always use a saw guard. There are very few instances when we will not use a saw guard, and those will be covered in a later